George flies south. The leaves on the trees were turning brown. Winter was coming. Lots of birds were heading south. It was time for George to learn to fly. "Are you ready, George?" said his mum. "Not quite," said George. "I think I might fall. I think that I like my nest best. Will you get me some worms, Mum? And I'll stay over here." Whilst George waited, a strong gust of wind swept through the park. It tore through the branches, scattering the leaves everywhere. And what did the wind do? George's nest wobbled a lot and lifted higher and higher into the air. "Mum," said George, "Mum, look at me. I'm flying. Whee!" But George's mum was too far away. She couldn't hear him calling. And when she flew back to the tree, George and his nest were gone. "George, George," she cried, "where are you?" "I'm here, Mum," called George. "I flew down in my nest." And then, without any warning, George and his nest were on the move again, on top of a car. "Am I going south, Mum?" asked George. "Hold on," shouted his mum. "I'm coming." But George couldn't hold on. He flew into the air and took off into it. "Look at me, Mum. Look at me," said George. "I'm flying yet again." And he landed on a boat. "You can't stay here, George," said his mum. "You've got to leave your nest. You have to try to flap your wings." And George tried and he tried. "You have to try harder," said his mum. "What are we going to do, Mum?" as the boat cruised down the river. Much later, the boat stopped and George was lifted into the air. Up, up, and up he goes. "Don't move, George," said his mum. George looked down and he was glad he had still had his nest, because he was very high up in the air. "Don't worry," said his mum. "We'll try again tomorrow." George curled up in his nest and fell fast asleep. And the next morning, George woke up with a start. "Look out, George!" shouted his mum as a cat strapped and sprung towards him. Crack! The cat landed, and George's nest began to fall. "Don't worry, Mum, I'm all right," said George. And down, down, down he fell. Twig by twig, the nest started to fall apart, until only George was left. "Mum!" cried George, "I've lost my nest." "George, you have to flap your wings," shouted his mum. "Now it's time." George tried really hard. "You can do it," said his mum. "I'm trying," said George, and with a deep breath and a huge beat of his wings, George flew. "I knew you could do it, George," said his mum. "I'm ready to fly south now," said George. "Let's go. I hope there's lots of worms."